Alrighty, so this is going to be a series of very casual videos that probably not going to have the highest of quality of stuff, but it's still something I wanted to do. So several years ago on a completely different channel, before I bought my house, I made a video where I talked about how when I did buy a house, I wanted to work on doing like a home lab setup and work on doing smart home things. I've now lived in this house for almost 2 years to the date, and we still haven't done anything with it. I've done some messing around, but I've never actually fully committed into having any sort of home lab setup. So this series of videos I'm going to make are just going to be to document my work on adding a home lab. Now, I do want to preface immediately that this is by no means professional. I am learning all of this as I go from channels that I've watched, like Hardware Haven, Jeff Geerling. They're all stuff that I am learning and implementing myself, but I am by no means a professional. So if you're going to watch this series with the intent of learning and mimicking what I do, I highly recommend not doing that. The purpose of these videos is just for me to have fun and document what I'm working on. So the first thing is I want to install a touchscreen that we can use to interact with everything. The goal is that I want to have a computer running Home Assistant as the running Home Assistant in the Home Lab. And that's the first step, one of the first steps. Originally in that video that I made prior, I talked about how I wanted to repurpose an old Microsoft Surface tablet. Specifically, I have a really old, like 4th generation Surface tablet that I don't utilize anymore since I have replaced it. And so my goal was to take this and find some way to mount the screen, like mount it on the wall so we could use this as the touchscreen interface. But since then, I haven't really done any work on doing it and figuring out a way that I could elegantly get it set up anywhere. So I just haven't moved forward with it, unfortunately. But the other day, my wife did find a Alexa, like a smart hub thing that's a touchscreen. Now, this is sort of counterintuitive to the whole point of having Home Assistant because we don't want to rely on services like Amazon. I don't want to have to rely on a company like Amazon to manage my stuff, and if Amazon has issues, then I can't use my stuff anymore. The whole point is that Home Assistant exists so I don't have to rely on them. But my wife is more interested in something that she can utilize easily and something she can mess with easily, and that she doesn't have to learn how to navigate a whole thing like this. So my goal is that I'm going to install the Alexa Smart Hub thingy, whatever, and then I'm going to still run Home Assistant through it, but also still offer the Alexa version for my wife to use to operate in case she doesn't want to use the Home Assistant version. So the goal is for this video, I'm going to install that touchscreen and just sort of cover some of the other stuff that I have in mind for getting started and what we're going to do with the first steps for this. Now, I did mention I have been doing some testing, and that testing is actually done on this Intel NUC. So this, as opposed to the other mini PCs I've shown on this channel or the other channel, I am actually using this Intel NUC as a way to mess with things and test stuff. So this is currently running Debian, and it's mostly I'm using it for Casa OS to run some containers. Currently this just has Home Assistant on it, as well as I was messing with, I think it's Plex, one of those services where you can just host your own video stuff. All of this so far has just been tinkering, and I haven't really gotten too deep in any of it. So currently my plan is, at least for the hardware side of the Home Lab, it is going to start with this Intel NUC that I have here, because this is I think it's a 7th gen i5 with 32 gigs of RAM, and I think it's a 1 terabyte SSD in here. So it's pretty solid. It was able to run a lot of the stuff that I was testing. I was able to host a Minecraft server, and me and my friends were able to run and try it, and it seemed to hold up pretty fine. So I think at least for a starting base, this will work out. And then I have other stuff. I have an old computer of mine that I replaced 2 years ago. That has I think it's a 9th gen i7, 32 gigs of RAM. I think it still has a terabyte SSD with I think it's a 5 terabyte HDD in it. So that could be reutilized for something as well. But the main thing I've been messing with is this NUC. Just because of how versatile it is, and the hardware just allows me to mess with so many different things. But currently, the idea is that the core, at least for now, will be run off this little guy, and then I can just work off of that. Now, as for where it'll all go, down here in my basement, we've been renovating it since we bought the house, so it's still kind of in a bit of a state of that. But here, down in the basement, we have this little closet here that I think is perfectly sized for what I want to do with it. And this is where I'm thinking of putting all of the stuff. That way it's at least far away from where we occupy the space, and it can be a little bit hidden, but still accessible. The only downside with this is far from any sort of networking, because this is the other side of the house. And when we had our new fiber line installed, I had all of the network equipment installed in my office on the other side of the building. So the other thing I could do is maybe utilize the closet in my office instead, but this is what I was originally thinking, is this small space. Now, as for the Echo Hub thing itself, we got it here, and my plan with this guy is I'm going to wall mount it into our hallway here. So the idea is probably somewhere in this vicinity, right next to our light switch that we have for the hallway, which actually doesn't work, but the goal is to have it mounted here, and then we're actually going to have it plugged into a thing we have up here. So we have because our hallway light doesn't work, we have created a different solution where we have these little lights that run through the whole hallway instead, that connect to this up here. So my plan is to plug the hub into this and then just have the cable run all the way down and then mount it here. So I just gotta get this mounted. Alright, and then after an embarrassingly long amount of time, it is finally installed. I ran into a bit of an issue where my wife couldn't remember where we put our stud finder, and so I had to just take a measuring tape and just measure from the corner to find where a stud should be. And then I got this side installed, mounted just fine, but then this side, it was being a bit of a pain, and I accidentally stripped the screw that's provided with the kit by trying to install it. And so now that it's actually in place, we have the wire running, and I've got some little hooks installed, and we bring it up here. So it is currently not plugged in. I showed this as how we have the whole light situation in our hallway as a replacement for the actual light that doesn't function in the hallway. The problem is I can't really install it. There is another outlet right here I could plug it into, but we need to actually get a different sort of breaker, or not breaker, we need to get another piece of hardware so we can actually split this, because we currently have the hallway lights managed by this switch right here. So when we want to go to bed, we flip the switch and it turns off the hallway light. So this is how we keep the lights on in the hallway. So if I were to plug it into that, then it would just lose power once we turn off the lights in the hallway. So right now, just gonna wait for us to get some other cable that we can split here. That way we can plug this in and get it plugged in and have it active no matter what the light situation looks like in the hallway. So that pretty much just concludes this first part of this series. I mentioned that, again, this is going to be probably a long-running thing where I don't really know how often I'll make these videos, so if you do have any advice or things you'd like to point out for somebody who's just getting started with their home lab setup, feel free to leave comments below and share your insight and opinions and advice. The next video will probably be on me figuring out where I'm going to put it all, but for now we at least have the first part of it set up, where now we have some way for us to interface with everything once we get it in place, or at least the main way to interface with Home Assistant once I get that up and running. So if you enjoyed watching, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back in some point in the future for the next video.